Hey everyone, welcome to your online cafe. Someone recently asked me as to why I'm so casually dressed up in your online cafe and not so casual on the Bloomer chat. And I'm so glad actually that you asked me that question because it'll give me an opportunity to reiterate the difference between the two platforms. Your online cafe is all about you, the topics you want to hear. So, if there is something that you want to talk about, you can reach out to me. If there is an expertise that you want to bring in, you can reach out to me. If there is a journey that you want to share with all of us, you can reach out to me. If there is a guest that you would like to be a part of the show, you can reach out to me. So this platform is all about by you, for you, of you. Bloomer Chat is slightly different because there it's I bring in the guest. I decide on the topic, I decide on the structure, and it's really about social causes, social issues. I also try and highlight some of the extraordinary work people are putting in, which we otherwise don't get to hear about. The structure and the format is a little bit different. There, I'm in control. I'm in the driver's seat. Here, you are on the driver's seat. So I hope that distinction is clear. Today's topic is around anger management. We all have our trigger points. We all become angry, and it is okay to become angry to a certain extent. Because in fact it actually gives us a channel to release some of the negative situations and issues that we're dealing with. But if that anger becomes frequent, and if it starts affecting your own health, mental, emotional, physical health, and it starts affecting the relationship that you are in, then there is something to worry about. We have, as always, Dr. Vimal with us, who will join us shortly. She will be with us in the studio, and then we can go ahead with the questions. As always, please feel free to pop in your questions. I will read them as we progress with our conversation. So let me bring in Dr. Vimal with us, and let's get on with the show. Hi, Dr. Vimal.
Hi, Sonal. Hi, everyone out there who's viewing us.
Yes, yes. I think this people have really started to look forward to listening to you because I think this pandemic. So I think there are two aspects to this pandemic. One, we are getting a lot of family bonding, family time together to bond. Because the physical proximity is a lot more than earlier, but I think also the other aspect is that because we are, always with each other, some of the existing mental conditions are also being extenuated. So I think people are kind of appreciating this series, and like I said, some of the insights and the inputs that you have been giving them has been phenomenal. I've gotten so many messages saying I'm sure they're reaching out to you as well, and but I wanted to actually tell you on the show that people really appreciate what you bring to them in their lives.
Thank you so much because, like Sonal and I had talked about it a long time ago, and the endeavor was to bring around informative talk around certain very common areas in relationships that affect and change the dynamics of the relationship. So I'm really glad that it's being of help. Thank you.
Uh, let's just start with, as always, the basic. Vimal, what is anger? Like, how do we define anger actually?
Um, Mark Twain had said, anger is the acid that does more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. I love that quote about anger because
Beautiful,
I
actually.
think it explains it so well. It's more harmful for the person who experiences anger, especially recurrently, and of course, the person on which it is poured or poured, or is the at the receiving end of anger. So this was a quote, but by definition, anger is one of the most basic human emotions, as elemental as happiness, sadness, anxiety, or even disgust. These emotions are tied to our basic survival, and have been honed over the course of human history. Physiologically, anger is related to the fight, flight, or freeze response of the sympathetic nervous system. It's I know we don't really talk technicality here, but this is important because I'm going to later refer to the fight and flight. And anger prepares humans to fight. Fighting doesn't necessarily mean throwing punches. It might motivate. Um, it might motivate communities to combat injustice, like when we were when we were tribes, or by changing laws, or by enforcing new behavioral norms. Um, at the core of anger, lies hurt, fear, and frustration. That has adopted the expression of anger as a protective mode. Um, so if you could learn, if we could all learn to name the feeling that we are feeling, um, the dialogue would be of a different quality altogether. Anger is the emotion that hijacks the brain and flies faster than thought. Normally, we say there is a thought and there is a feeling that accompanies it. When it comes to anger, it usually flies faster than thought.
Acha, acha.
Thoughts are not involved till later, and that's the reason anger does not allow to think through of the consequences, that and it actually rather makes us dumb. I would say that anger really does block out our consequential mind, and therefore, I'd like to say that it makes us dumb. Um, so, there are certain set of emotions like fear, phobias, disgust, terror, and reluctance. These are some emotions that take us away from the source of the feeling itself. And there are other feelings like desire, lust, greed, addiction, and anger, which compel us towards the source of the emotion. And anger can be deadly seductive. It can also save lives if it stems from the protective survival instinct. Um, and I'd like, yeah, anger is a trance state, and it is extremely energizing, focusing, and compelling. And like I said, it drives you to the source of the emotion.
So, is anger in any form a good trait? You know, can anger be good at all? Because we all go through that, right?
Yes, we all go through anger, and it's a very go-to response. We don't, like I said, we can't think before we react. It's reactive, it's energizing, and it makes you feel in charge and in control. So to some extent, we all get angry. And does anger have a healthy form? You said yes. There are two types. So there are various types of anger, and there are two types which are particularly healthy, which is one is called incidental anger and the other is called empathetic anger. Incidental anger is that which um, for example, I and you sign up for a project, and we say, okay, the deadline is after a week. And then 2 days later, we have a conversation, and I say, oh, Sonal, I've already done my part of the work. And you are motivated, and you say, oh, you've already done it. Let me also finish it in the next 2 days, and let's get over it. So it's kind of motivational. हिंदी में हम उसको जोश बोलते हैं. That is the incidental anger. That's a healthy form. And the other is empathetic anger, like when somebody else goes through some sort of a crisis, challenge, um, is a victim of a crime, and we feel empathy, but we also have strong values around that empathy, and the feeling is anger because it's a helpless situation.
Okay.
So those are the two healthy types of anger.
One of the things that you mentioned with which I didn't even know, and which is very interesting, is when you're angry, the thought actually comes later, and that feeling or whatever neurological whatever is happening comes first. What is that? What is that? Like, what comes first? Is there something happening in the brain that actually triggers that anger before the thought comes in?
Okay, that's a very good question. So, when people are angry, they're at their weakest because they feel they're feeling victimized. Sometime in early childhood, uh, the the person has experienced powerlessness, helplessness in some context, and they feel victimized back then, and are not equipped to fight back or protect themselves. Though they know that some anything that they're experiencing is not okay, and yet there is no equipment to fight back with. This experience or experiences of powerlessness festers and it festers and it festers, and then consciously or subconsciously, someday the person decides, never again am I going to be in that position again. And that is why so so then anger becomes like a reaction, and it is either directed towards the other person or towards one own self. There is a language of anger because anger is a signal, and one which is worth listening to. Anger is a message that the person is hurt, that the rights are being violated, the boundaries are being crossed, that one needs or wants are not being met. Simply, there is just something about the whole experience that doesn't feel right. And our anger may also tell us that we are not addressing an important emotional issue in our lives, and which is from the past and is collective. Um, and also, it could be too much of self. Like, anger in narcissists comes from a sense of too much of self, like I'd mentioned in the last talk. So that it involves a set of beliefs, it involves values, it involves desires or ambitions that are being compromised, and it comes and usually it shows up in relationships, whether they're personal, professional, or otherwise, or even both. So, the origin of anger is there is one perceives it, one perceives whatever's happening, like the stimuli, as threat. The trigger of anger is usually perceived as threat. And the threat categories could be the fear of rejection, isolation, failure, something unknown. And the threat is that of loss of control or valuing power. Um, or they're basically primitive coping skills as well for some people. So, and that is why it comes out as a reaction and not as a response. So that is why it is like so spontaneous and so mindless and very detrimental for the person who's inflicting it and the person who's being inflicted by it.
Also, a lot of times the person who gets angry is aware of that weakness in himself or herself. Right? They know the trigger points, they know that they get angry, but in spite of knowing, they can't help it. When the situation comes in, they will get angry. So why is that? In spite of knowing, why does the reaction still happens?
Yeah. Yes, most people who get angry know that it's not okay. Also, because of the way they feel as an aftermath, and also because of the feedback they get or the consequences. That it's very isolating because nobody wants to be around an angry person. So, some of the beliefs about anger and relationships uh, keep the anger in place. uh, also that is why it's cyclic, and it's repetitive, it's recurrent in relationships, because the one of the major beliefs is that it is the anger is a powerful emotion, and power is protection. So that's one of the beliefs that keeps it in place. And the another one could also be that the only way to keep safe is to create fear in the other person, and they know that they can intimidate the other person by anger. So I will get my way, I will be in control. Another belief is that before someone else hurts me, I can hurt them. So that it's like the attack is the best form of defense belief. And yet another one is that the world is not a safe place and people cannot be trusted. So if I have a belief around the world not being a safe place and people cannot be trusted, then I am compromising on my basic human needs, which is the connectedness, rootedness, and belongingness that I think I talk about in every episode we do. It could also come from harsh or disengaged parenting that leaves that leads to a lot of anger, which later becomes rage in some cases as well. So these are some of the things that keep it in place. Also, there are benefits to anger. Um, like if I am powerful, then I can push away or dominate a threat. So at least my belief would be that I can push away any threat, and so I'm safe. It could also be my belief that I keep a punishment or a revenge to make others feel the same pain that I have gone through.
Right.
Um, and sometimes anger also saves people who don't want to be vulnerable in front of any other person. It hides their emotional pain. We use the term masked by anger very frequently in psychology, and that this is what it means, because if I am sad, I could mask it by anger. um, if I am jealous, I could mask it by anger. um, when I don't want to, even there are times when there is a loss of a near one or a loved one in the family, and the only emotion experienced is anger, because that also hides the grief behind it, and also prevents one from feeling that there is an abandonment by the person who's left. It also gets attention. It because tantrums is something that gets attention and creates a scene, and that can be very rewarding for someone who would like to keep anger in place. Um, there is there is also a belief that comes from I can change the other person's behavior, because the other person's behavior doesn't work for me, so I can change that behavior and then I can control that person. So these are some of the benefits of anger that could also help keep it. So I guess essentially what I'm saying is that there is an intention to anger, and then there is a non-intention to anger. It could be subconscious or it could also be conscious.
Okay. Um, s- um, so, when do you know that there is a cause for concern for a person? Like, what are some of the symptoms that you see in a person which can actually, help us extend help beyond home person? Like, when do we know that the person needs external counseling, or there is an added help that is needed to take care of the anger? Because
Yeah.
it's
So
such a emotion that we go through on a daily basis that sometimes we can actually overlook chronic anger versus the regular anger. So it would really help to know where to draw the line actually.
chronic anger versus the what anger?
I mean, I'm saying that we all go through our trigger points, uh,
Yeah.
but yes, how do we know that a certain kind of anger is a chronic anger and it needs additional help, maybe counseling or
Yeah.
any
I
other?
mean, I guess what you're also asking is when it becomes a dysfunction, right? Like when it becomes, when it's okay and when it becomes not
Yeah,
okay.
correct.
Yeah, yeah. Well, largely when it becomes a dysfunction in any or at any areas of life, that's the time to look into it. And usually, again, this is, because this is a general talk show, it's probably a good time to put a disclaimer in that this is an umbrella understanding of anger. It does not address or promise to address any of the individual issues. This is an umbrella understanding, and every human being is unique, and the way it shows up could be very different for different people. And it is only for the sake of information. So please treat it on that level only. Um, so yeah, usually it shows up as a problem area in a relationship, and also physical health. That's that's a major sign point. There is a red flag when maybe the blood pressure starts to shoot up, when there's some bodily changes, cholesterol levels go high, or the heartbeat races, or there's breathlessness, or fatigue, or depression setting in. Those are some of the, but one could look into it earlier and prevent that from happening as well. Um, See, anger comes with a price tag, like anything else in life, and it affects many realms of our life. One of the major realms it affects is social. At the social relational level, it pushes people away because nobody wants to be around angry people. And when it pushes people away, it increases isolation. It also intimidates people. And and the person who's getting angry thinks that they can get respect by getting angry and getting control, but it's actually intimidating for the person who's at the receiving end. And thereby, it becomes a relationship of respect versus intimidation. This very frequently happens at workplaces where there is a dominating or an angry uh, member, and the other one who may be calm or fun loving and not so serious, or not so serious by the person who's expecting that seriousness of the other person. So any expectation that is different from the person on authority will elicit respect versus intimidation. It, at the social level, also, it's perceived by children. Perceived by children, meaning that it's internalized by anger is internalized by children, and it manifests in increased anxiety levels. It could also manifest in lack of focus, lack of attention, and other psychosomatic stomach aches and headaches and breathlessness and tantrums in children as well. Because a child, when we come into the world, we are not designed to be angry. So as a child, we don't understand what is anger all about, and what is all this verbal anger shooting across the room, or why are mom and dad fighting, and why are they speaking loudly, and then why are they sulking and withdrawing and not talking to each other. It's very confusing for children, and that is how they internalize it. um, so this is at the social level. Physically, anger uses a ton of energy, and it uses a ton of energy for what is often not a major threat, because remember, it's a perceived threat, it is not a real threat. And then because the energy is channelized into anger, and it reduces the immunity of the body over time, um, because the energy is channelized into handling the external threat, and it is not channelized internally into handling the actual threats to the body in terms of the viruses, the bacteria, and all the other stuff that may the body needs the energy to prepare itself for. It causes injury, like rage can hurt other people, um, and it could also harm self at the physical level. Ulcers, headaches, migraines, self harm, heart attacks, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, pains and aches in the body, fibromyalgia. These are all, they're all psychosomatic ailments which come up over time because of either suppressed anger or too much expressed anger. Could be either way. At the emotional level, it reduces the amount of time to be happy because there is time which is spent getting angry and then throwing the anger, spewing the anger out, and then there is the time which takes from recovery of anger. So one anger outburst could last over 3 days because then, one when the anger is steaming up, one when there is the actual outburst, and then another day where the anger is in recovery. So it takes away from happiness, fun, connectedness, um, also the fluidity of life, because life is meant to be fluid. We use the term flow with the life or flow of life. It's a barrier in that fluidity, and that in itself can cause um, obstacles in the people we are dealing with, and also at the emotional level of self, because there's no connection to your own self, because a person who's angry doesn't feel great after the anger. And it can majorly, this is one of the major causes leading to depression. Suppressed anger leads to depression. At the environmental level, uh, breaking of stuff, so there's financial loss, increases chances of legal issues, because if there is road rage, or when people start to drive recklessly because they're angry, they can hurt people in public. um, and it reduces options, such as people will not want to be in a relationship with an angry person. People would not want to make friends with an angry person at work or at social gatherings. And yet another way would be a loss of employment, because if there are anger episodes at work, one could be asked to leave, because the other people may perceive that as threat. There is reduced productivity, and certainly an increased illness due to anger. So the reason, the reason I've repeated illness, the reason I'm repeating illness for the environmental factors is because it also induces illness on the person who's bearing with the anger, because that person may be living in fear or maybe reacting back with anger. So it has a domino effect, and that is why environmentally it can increase the chances of people falling ill.
Uh, so, how can the anger be addressed at home by the person who's undergoing that anger issue and people around them? Because it's not possible to call the counselor every day, but this is one issue that if a person has anger, then you actually suffer from it every day. So what can be done on a regular basis at home to address this by both sides, a person going through it and the person around them, to make it better, to make their lives better?
Yeah. What can a person do? See, it needs to, first of all, let's understand that a family or a workplace has relational dynamics, and it's the dynamics that work together to affirm the anger and also to find release. Because a person who's, let's say, a person who's throwing tantrums or is having outbursts. There are also people who are taking it in, and that is why it enables the person who's throwing the outburst to continue to do so. So I'm not blaming either one, because the next question may be what else can the other person do. But like I said, every case is like, every person is peculiar in their own way, and it will be very specific. But overall families have dynamics, and so do professional relationships, and it eventually leads to keeping the anger in place without intending to. So if you pass the anger and see what's behind it, you will have a very different conversation. In place of judging or resenting or labeling the other person, the angry person, if you could ask what is it that you're really hurting about. For instance, if a husband is continuously throwing tantrums or is angry, and or a child is doing it, usually the response is a reaction, or the response is keeping quiet. Neither of them work. You need to express, ask in a very neutral, unbiased way, what is it that is really hurting you? What is it that is really bothering you? So you encourage the person to express and listen without being defensive. But the question needs to be asked only when there is a listening ear. But if you feel you can't listen, please don't ask. Because the person needs to be asked to have the space to express without judgment, and also open up to the scars and the wounds, no matter how irrational you think they are for the other person. But the fact is that it is the other person's truth. And then take the conversation further at a different time. Because remember, each person is handling their own emotions. They are not handling the other person's emotions. But usually anger is an attack. It comes across as an attack on the other person. But the angry person is the one who's hurting, and probably hurting all the time. And if this is repetitive, if this is recurrent, and if this is getting unbearable for the people on whom the anger is being spewed, then you need to encourage that person to go take therapy. But take therapy from a person who understands the mechanism and the processes of anger and knows how to help someone come out of it, or at least handle it better.
So it looks like on a regular basis, what can really help is the communication. When when the person is not angry, then that might be a good time to actually sit down with the person and get to the bottom of where the anger gets triggered. So Vimal, if the anger issue gets addressed as in the childhood, like if you recognize and if you start addressing the problem, is it possible for a person to actually to grow up into a person without having anger issues? Is it something that can be treated if recognized early on in stages of life, or there is some I don't know, chemical trigger to it? So what I'm trying to ask is it treatable if addressed at an early age, or is it not?
Yeah, certainly it is. It is because every anger is not a disease, it is not a disorder. Uh, Anger is natural, it's a normative, we all have it. It is the degree to which we get angry that makes a difference. Also, anger is like steam. So it's going to find vent. If it is finding vent in childhood, and the child is encouraged to go for therapy, or there is a proper intervention, proper meaning the required intervention that happens, chances are that it will not get carried forward. And because angry people are walking around with open wounds. Like I said, it is not, no human being comes to the planet or is born angry. No baby is angry. Babies are full of fun, they're happy, they love attention, They seek attention, and they feel they're entitled to all the fun in the world. And then they learn anger. Anger is a learned emotion.
It's a learned emotion. Okay.
But there are genetics that come into play, but the genetics come into play more from the point of view of a disorder, or maybe because it's transgenerational, like दादाजी को बहुत गुस्सा आता था, चीजें तोड़ देते थे, फिर उनके बेटे को आने लगा, और फिर अब थर्ड जनरेशन भी वैसे ही बिहेव करती है. So that, but uh, that needs therapeutic intervention of a different kind, um, for the person to realize that this doesn't work. Also because the context and the people in life change. So दादी ने शायद बर्दाश्त कर लिया होगा, मम्मी ने बर्दाश्त कर लिया, but doesn't mean that your relationships will also go through it, because today's context of life is very different,
Everything.
and there is also a lot more awareness around it. So yes, it is treatable, but if it is a disorder, then it needs clinical intervention, which means more like medical intervention, and also maybe cognitive behavior therapy, apart from talk therapy. Um, but that would depend on the cases, like the context of the anger and also the intensity of the anger.
Okay. I have a few questions and some comments. I'm just going to read them out. Suresh Chandra Kumar, he's saying anger is expressed most of the times. At times, it's not expressed and taken internally, and one keeps on burning inside. How to control, had, how to control and handle inner anger or reactions.
Yes, that's a very good question, because we have only been talking about the anger which comes out as expressed, and there is unexpressed anger, which, if not taken care of, would usually take the form of depression or depressive moods. Um, we are always talking to ourselves the whole time, and we are the ones who are listening to our own conversation. When there is criticism, complaint, cynicism, um, competition, comparison happening within our thought process, is going to encourage a person to become angry. And um, the way to change that around would be to get someone to talk to as support, a therapist or a friend, and talk to them and change the conversation in your head. Learn to talk to yourself differently, because the quality of the conversation you have with yourself determines whether you're going to get angry or not. And it then changes, and this is what mindfulness is about, which is one of the major things that we do to change anger into calm.
There's one more question from Meenakshi Bhandari. Hi, Auntie. If two people are living together, one or the other knows what is bothering the spouse. You need a good relationship to be able to talk about it. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. For the other person to open up, they should have the confidence that the spouse or the companion will actually be able to understand without judgment as to where they're coming from. So that's a
Yes,
very
absolutely. And that is why I mentioned, like, only ask the question if you're willing to listen. Because if you're not willing to listen, please don't ask. Because then it can make things worse. Because first, there is the insecurity, or the person's feeling unsafe or is treading on shallow waters. And then suddenly, if you make space for them to express and then you judge them, it will blow up, or it will shut the other person down completely. So it could go either way, and both of them are detrimental. So, yes, if it is, like I said, if it becomes a chronic problem in the dynamics of the relationship, it cannot be sorted out between the two people or the three people who are facing it within the family home. It does need external intervention. So, you need to get the right resource to help you. Because, see, if you could sort it out within yourself, you would have by now.
true. That's true. One of the things that you mentioned, Vimal, which I thought was again very important, was you said that the other person who's at the receiving end, should also be able to draw a line, draw a boundary, and say, I'm not going to take it. Right? Because a lot of times uh, the boundaries get blurry because it's easier to let go than, excuse me, today my throat is troubling me.
That's okay.
So what I was saying was, like what you mentioned, that the other person also should be able to draw a line and say, I'm not going to take it. But doing that, would that actually deter the other person's anger in some way? Will that act as a deterrent? Because I agree, yeah, if you accept it, then there is, there is a free flow, easy flow of anger, and so the control. But if the other person pushes back, does that help in any way?
Yes, it does, because so it may not help immediately. It may actually exaggerate the anger or aggravate it, but then, there is any change, any process of change happens over a little bit of time. And then there is that little bit of time in between, which is unpredictable, and it can go either way. But it's important to see the what are your options. One is that you continue to um, you know continue to bear with it, tolerate it, adjust to it, adapt to it, whatever it is that you're doing, and certainly it's not working. So, and the other way is to take a stand for yourself, either of which is not going to make you happy immediately.
Correct.
But if you don't take a stand, then it's going to keep on eroding you, because it's like, Mark Twain said, anger is like acid, so it's going to keep eroding you. But if you do take a stand for yourself, even if the problem is aggravated, at least you would have taken a stand, and then eventually things will change, and will be different.
Yeah. And I guess, that stand can also be that, you need to go see a counselor. Just draw that boundary. Just, tell the other person that either we sit down and have a conversation to figure out where the anger is coming from, or if you will continue doing what you're doing, I'm not going to take it. Maybe it's time for you to seek counseling. That could also be a stand to take, because, like you rightly said, that if it could be resolved within the family, it probably would have anyway. And a
Yes,
lot of it's easier to let go than pick your battles. Picking up battles in any case is tough, but I
yes.
think the big picture, in the longer run, you'll always win. I think it's a win-win
Yeah.
for the.
Also, because it's a cultural belief कि चुप रहो, ये इंसान ऐसा ही है, एक्सेप्ट कर लो, समझौता कर लो, बर्दाश्त कर लो, ये सब cultural beliefs है हमारे, which there's nothing wrong with it, but we also need to know कहाँ तक,
कहाँ तक
वो
सही,
define नहीं होता है
वो
कि कहाँ
बाउंड्री
तक.
है. हाँ,
हाँ. It's like हम अपने घर के दरवाजे खुले तो नहीं रखते ना, गेट खुला तो नहीं रहता. We keep it closed and we have a lock on it, because we do not want intrusions happening into our privacy.
true.
Anger is invasive. Anger, because in anger, people say the most brutal things possible, and so it's an individual's responsibility to take a stand and say, no more. I'm not going to allow this to happen to me.
Absolutely. You know, it looks like, what, any issue that we are talking about in terms of mental illness, everything roots back to the childhood. That's what I've been hearing, and there is a layering that actually happens with kids, which actually can show up in different forms of mental illness and mental health. So I guess it's very important for the parents, who have young children, to be aware of what the kid is going through. And like you rightly said, none of the kids are born with those tendencies. So anything which is out of place, or it's something that you think you are not able to handle, a lot of times, rather than brushing it under the carpet, maybe that's the time we should actually address it. That way, we are actually able to address it while it gets triggered, rather than taking it to another level, which may actually come up in different forms of mental health later in life.
Yes, it does. And also, we teach our children how to, because children are learning from us how they are going to relate in their future relationships. So,
Yeah,
if we are, if we behave a certain way or we don't behave a certain way as we need to, both are going to impact the child tremendously. And we don't know how it's going to show up. So, but the clue is, as people, we drop signs and clues everywhere. So the clue is that if there is behavior change in the child, or the child is quiet or is not expressive or is throwing tantrums or is bullying other children in school or is talking differently or has started using abusive language or has started using certain things that are not in the normative of the household to use in the family norms, then those signs need to be picked up and they need to be questioned, because the earlier the intervention, the easier it is to nip it.
to address
The
it.
longer you wait, the harder it gets, because it keeps getting affirmed.
Absolutely. There is one comment from Aftab Ahmed. It's saying, I understand that it is better to release anger to rejuvenate your mind. Yes, absolutely. Like how Dr. Vimal, you also said, mindfulness is the key to most of the problems in the world, I feel. If
Yes.
you're mindful, then, response versus reaction also actually stems from you being mindful. So once you actually practice the being, mindfulness, then half of your troubles are gone anyway in life. There is another comment from Jiten Singh ji. It is extreme. Uh, it is extremely difficult to contain anger when subordinates do not comply with instructions. It results in delays in work and financial losses. How to contain anger under such condition? Rajni Chauhan.
You need you don't contain anger, because anger cannot be contained. You learn a new method which enables you to learn new options of handling with the issues of ineffectiveness or complacent uh, subordinates, or to get more effectivity out of the people that we face this issue at home also. It is like, of course, there is more at stake when it happens in offices, because you're also answerable to somebody else. um, there are new you know the key basically lies in learning new methodologies and new options of the way you relate to people. Because here, I think somewhere the belief is that it is only through anger that you can get the work done, but that's not true. There are other ways in which you can get work done. Also, the absence of anger does not mean that you become ineffective and you become completely lifeless, or become agreeable to anything that's going on which is not acceptable to you. It does not make you defenseless, or it does not take away your authority. um, I think that's one of the other things that that keeps anger in place, is uh, that the only way to get somebody to be more effective is to be angry and try and change them.
There's another comment from Meenakshi Bhandari. This lockdown has created an opportunity for us to notice these signs as we spend more time together. People need to go back to their normal life situations to be able to handle it better ourselves. Uh, that's a very good point. I have one more question, Jiten Singh ji. How to control anger when a growing child does not comply? I think that's the one thing that we all can relate to, because kids have a way of pushing your buttons. So,
Yes. What was the question exactly? What about the growing child?
how to control anger when a growing child does not comply? And and a lot of times they're in a state of defiance. Actually, the teenagers or any age for that matter.
My strong belief, and in many of the people I've worked with, um, is that children mirror back to us what we do and we are not aware of. So if the child is saying too many no's, or if the child is not complying, or the child is throwing tantrums, um, maybe it's time to look at our own behavior and see what can I do differently, because I'm the parent, and so the responsibility is mine. I'm sure that a changed behavior in self can elicit a different response from a child and from an adult.
Okay. So I think it again boils down to the same thing about communication. I guess if the child is in defiance and is not complying frequently, then maybe there is something else which is growing inside, which need to be addressed. I
Yes.
guess, right?
Because also as parents, we have different languages to relate to our children. It may not, and the language of the parent and the child may not match, because the parent may be expecting obedience or saying कि मैं ये बोल रही हूँ या मैं बोल रहा हूँ ये करो, and the child actually wants to communicate something else, and the parent may not be picking it up, which will result, eventually it will result in a tantrum or anger or some kind of things breaking, or the child will go out and hurt somebody else, because it will communicate, like the child needs to communicate, and they don't have the words to articulate what they are trying to express or what their needs are, because a child is all about needs. If the child's needs are met, they will be happy and they will comply and they will be okay, because parental approval is a matter of life and death for a child, even as
Whether
adults,
whether they show it or not, I guess.
whether they show it or not. And even as adults, don't we want, we still at the age of 50, 60, 70, want our parents to be happy even after they have departed. We do things to make them rest in peace. We do things that, let me do this because it would make my father happy, or it would make take. So that is the power of a parent. And for a little child, if you understand that, and if you understand the language, that connection will come. There is no way it can't come.
I guess as parents, we just have to be at it.
Yeah.
We have to just keep working on making that bridge work.
Yes, and
It could be a
it's so hard to be a parent.
that's one of the most challenging things to be a parent, I
Most
think.
challenging roles a human being have is to be a parent. Also because I'm a parent, and nothing ever seems okay. Like nothing ever seems right.
And we learn, I think we challenge ourselves the most when you become parents, right? Every day you're challenging yourself to be a better person, to be a better version of yourself, because otherwise it's very difficult to actually handle these kids. And these kids are very smart,
They
and
are.
they're extremely intelligent, very aware, very exposed. It's a different generation that we're dealing with, and the only thing that we can do is improve ourselves.
Ourselves. We need to improve ourselves to improve the relationship with our children. See, all that is in place. There is more intellect, there is more awareness, there's more exposure, but emotionally, they are still children.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we all want the same thing: unjudged, unbiased acceptance.
Yeah, that's true. So with that, I have come to the end of my questions, and I don't see any questions from the audience. If there is anything that you would like as a wrap-up thought, Vimal, please go ahead, and then we can
Um,
wrap up.
as quickly, I could just say a couple of things to say what one can do with anger, like because we have only been talking about um, the problem areas connected to anger, but the solutions to anger. Um, so one is that, if it is recurrent, please go see a therapist. And some of the useful things one can do are mindfulness, like we spoke about. Um, if there is a trigger which is being perceived as a threat, please distract yourself. journaling, writing about your feelings really helps to combat anger. Eliminate as many anger triggers as possible. um, One other way is to check in with yourself regularly to catch your anger warning signs. Each person has a warning sign coming before the anger comes to a boiling point, and ask yourself, how am I feeling? Am I tired, exhausted, hungry, irritable, over caffeinated? And look into it and change that for yourself. You may not be able to change everything, but you can change certain areas, and that is where improvement will begin to happen. There is a breathing regime that one could follow. There are meditation regimes. They're all over the internet, and I'm sure you can have support groups where people would educate you on that or make you aware. And different things work for different people. So this is again an umbrella conclusion to um, anger.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Vimal. As always, I actually for the next weeks, I have few requests that we can discuss offline for the topics that the viewers would like us to discuss. Again, a very helpful session. I think it's one of those topics that can go on forever, because the moment the kids are in place and the moment husbands and spouses are in place, I think the issues are infinite. But we need to wrap up somewhere. So till next Sunday, this is just Sonal signing off. I'll see you this Thursday on Boomer Chat, and we will discuss the new education policy, because there's a lot of things that have a lot of reforms have come in, but you're not aware of them. So having a show really helps, because then somebody is spelling it out for you, so that, and this is something that every parent should be aware of. So I'll see you on the Bloomer Chat. This is Just Sonal signing off. Thank you for your support. Please coming back and follow me on Just Sonal. Bye. Bye, Vimal. See you
Bye.
soon.
Thank you.